thank you for joining and welcome to our Smiley Talk, A World Without Plastic. So we have heard more and more over the past 5 to 10 years how detrimental plastic really is for our environment and the planet. So we're going to delve a bit deeper into that discussion today with our three speakers. We have Amy, Amajit and Natalie, and you'll be hearing more about who they are and their organisations very shortly. I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of us. So we are Smiley Movement. We are the not-for-profit arm of the Smiley Company, and we have a mission to inspire people to drive forward positive change in the world and take individual action that will collectively benefit the community and people and the planet. So we run these Smiley Talks. We also have a positive news website, Smiley News, and a podcast called Define Optimism. And all of these things link to align with the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So this talk itself aligns with the responsible consumption and production and the climate action goal. But everything we do always sort of aims and strives towards those goals to aim for a healthier and happier world. So before we go into the introductions, wherever you're watching, we're streaming live on Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. You can ask a question to any of our speakers and we'll dedicate the last 10 to 15 minutes of the talk to go through your questions. But I think that's enough for me. So I'm going to go to our speakers now. So Amy, I'll come to you first. Did you want to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about who you are?
Hi, so I'm Amy. I run Awesome Wales Zero Waste stores in Barry and Cowbridge. We're a social enterprise and we're focused on helping people to do their weekly shop without unnecessary single-use plastic packaging. We also help to cut food waste and we offer a community hub where local people can meet to share ideas and run workshops. For those of you who don't know, a zero waste shop can also be called a refill shop. It's a space where you can come, bring your own containers and refill anything from rice and pasta, herbs and spices, washing up liquid shampoo, oils and vinegars, anything that you could normally buy in the supermarket, we offer it as a refill option. We also run a library of things here, which is a way for you to borrow things like DIY tools, gardening equipment, camping gear, kitchen gadgets for really low cost, but also a way for you to sort of share resources within the community. We run a cloth nappy library where parents can borrow a kit of cloth nappies to trial different brands and different shapes and sizes to see which ones work best for them and their family. And we host a lot of different community groups within our space. So we have Eco Mums group who meet with us here on a Friday to talk about everything from sling baby wearing and cloth bums through to how to sort of best make use of your allotment. We run seed swaps. We do lots of workshops for children and we have a schools program as well. So yeah, that's us at Awesome Wales.
Wow, so it's not just a zero waste shop. There's it sounds like a complete community hub you've got going there. And Amy is streaming from her zero waste store, which is why there might be some background noise. But she is right in the thick of it there. Natalie, I'll come to you next. Did you want to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your organisation?
Sure. Hi. Really great to be here. Thanks for inviting me on, Amy. And hello to all the viewers. I think it's really exciting that plastic is still getting attention in the environmental space because it certainly isn't a problem that has disappeared. So great to be able to talk about that with you all today, and amazing to hear about all that's going on with Amy in Wales. So yeah, I'm Natalie Fay. I'm the founder of City to Sea. So I set City to Sea up back in 2015 now in Bristol in the UK, and we really wanted to focus on tackling plastic pollution at source. So we run campaigns from sort of grassroots, community-based campaigns through to retailer petitions and petitions for the government. And we've been doing that now for about 6 years. And really what we identified back then was that there was a lot of organisations maybe working in marine conservation, and there were some organisations that were starting to focus on litter picks and beach cleaning, and we really wanted to do something to try and see if we could stem the tide of single-use plastics that are flowing into our rivers and seas. So we identified the kind of main objects, the main sort of offending items, really, the top 10 polluting single-use plastics that end up in our rivers and seas, and that's what we decided to focus in on. So we pretty much decided back then in 2015 that the first two areas that we'd focus on really were flushed plastics, so plastics that are quite often hidden plastics that might be in period products or wet wipes, and also cotton buds. So we did a big campaign called Switch the Stick back in 2016. We managed to get all of the UK retailers, so all the big supermarkets, to stop using plastic cotton buds and to switch them to cardboard or paper instead. And that move has stopped over 400 tons of non-recyclable single-use plastic at source every year, and that's plastic that could have been flushed and ended up in our rivers and seas. So I think quite early on that gave us a sense of our power as individuals, but also our power collectively at City to Sea to mobilise people and to help people who wanted to do something about plastic get behind our campaigns. So the other big thing that we focused on, as well as flushed plastics, was plastic water bottles, and we developed the refill campaign, which over the years has gone from strength to strength. And we started off here in Bristol, signing up shops and cafes to offer free water on the go, so people could come in with their bottle and refill it. And we started mapping places on a map, on a Google map. And from there, it's grown into a really fantastic campaign that's all over the UK. It's in 7 different countries, and it's gone beyond just people refilling their water bottles. So it's our refill app. It's free for people to use, and it helps people find zero waste shops and help them live a life with less plastic waste. So it's been really exciting to see that movement grow over the years. And we're now a team of around 20 people. So people might have heard of us and have seen our refill stickers or been using the refill app for a while. And I'm also an author. I love writing, and my second book, How to Save the World for Free, came out at the end of 2019, so just before the pandemic, and the paperback came out at the end of last year, end of 2021. So that's me. I'm looking forward to telling you more over the next hour.
Fantastic. And yeah, I think it was the refill revolution which made me first learn about City to Sea. I'm sure it would be the same for people watching, but I didn't realise it was in 7 different countries, so it is a lot bigger than I realised. Thank you. And Amajit, did you want to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do? Oh, we're on mute. Oh, let me. There we go.
Thank you, Amy, and to Natalie and Amy for sharing all the wonderful work that they're doing. It's phenomenal, it really is, and I'm so pleased to be here today. So I'm, as you said, Amajit Breyer. I'm an ex-fintech lawyer. I gave that up a couple of years ago to really become the founder of Ethical, which is an online retail destination that sells everything from beauty and wellness products through to furniture and food and wine. The idea behind it is to help customers make positive lifestyle choices. And we try and achieve that really through our journals, social media, PR activities. Every single product that we have on our site is vetted to make sure that it has the right ethics. And we have 13 ethics, whichever resonates with the individual. One of the most important ones, of course, is plastic free. Others include refillable, vegan, recycled, carbon reduced. We also focus on sustainability. It's a bit difficult without a definition, but a lot of it is logical thinking and common sense. So, but we also focus on ethically produced products because we really don't want to forget about human rights. And whether a fair wage is being paid to the cacao farm worker in Ecuador, for instance. So plastic pollution was really one of the main reasons why I started this journey. I started looking at what the UK was producing in terms of plastic waste, and how that was being disposed of. And really, whilst I was on this personal journey, there was a realization that I think we can do an awful lot to educate people to make the switch from single-use plastic to, reusable or refillable using the example of a single-use plastic water bottle, it's the most obvious one and possibly the easiest change that we can make. And yet, in the UK alone, we throw away billions of plastic bottles every single year. And so at Ethical, we want to introduce individuals to alternative products and alternative ways, and that's how we're striving towards reducing plastic. And as an individual, it made me aware of, for example, if as an individual you're aware, or you're made aware of the harm of buying single-use plastic and how it can be affecting you, then you're more likely to make that change.
Yeah, definitely. And what you just said about sort of the harm of single-use plastic brings me into my first question, which I was going to ask, which is, to kick things off, like, plastic is bad for the environment, and more people are reading, and I definitely am, educating themselves about how many things plastic is actually in, but how harmful it can be. It can wreak havoc on marine wildlife. It produces toxins. I read a long read about how plastic contributes to global warming. So if we were to say, why is plastic so bad for the environment? Are there any, it's a big question, but are there any sort of learnings or life experiences you've had, or through your sort of journeys, where you were like, wow, we really need to do something about this? And perhaps it started your journeys now. I'll come to you first, Amy. What was your sort of, did you have that light bulb moment of learning about something detrimental about what plastic was doing that made you want to sort of start up this awesome Wales hub?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first point for us was watching the Blue Planet 2 documentaries, where you could watch all these beautiful animals, amazing wildlife. There's sort of David Attenborough talking through all the different oceans and sort of the beautiful planet that we live on. And there was one episode that talked about sort of plastic pollution as a problem, and they called it the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, where you had huge amounts of sort of floating plastic bottles, discarded fishing nets, other items in the fishing industry. And it kind of hit home how difficult it is to throw something away. I think a lot of us think, when something's gone in the bin or gone into recycling, that it's gone, it's away, it doesn't exist anymore. And it kind of started me thinking that there is really no such place as away when you're trying to dispose of something like plastic that has such a huge lifespan. So I think our perspective now is that everything we do is connected. Our behaviours today will have an effect on the planet tomorrow. We've already seen that microplastics have been found in our soil, in the food that we eat, in the fish that people are eating, not to mention the sort of the detrimental effect that plastic pollution is having on wildlife and waterways in our oceans. So sort of from my perspective, there wasn't really a way to sort of recycle our way out of that problem. It needed to sort of be cut off at source. Otherwise, future generations will literally be left to clean up our mess. And then the other sort of starting point for us was looking at the impact of plastic in terms of its production and its lifespan, and how that has an impact on global warming, because there's carbon emissions at every stage. So reducing unnecessary plastic usage was a big thing for us, just to help cut our carbon emissions, and therefore start to sort of put the halt on climate change as well.
And I think just going back to what you said there about the Blue Planet episode, I feel like that was something that caught everyone's attention, because that's when we started to actually read about it in the media, and it not just be sort of like a niche subject. But it seemed to blow up in the right way, and the momentum has hopefully continued and will continue. Natalie, what about you? I'm not going to say why is plastic bad for the environment and give you that really massive question, but what was it specifically that really made you think, I want to do something about this? Did you learn something about plastic? Did you see something, or did you have that light bulb moment where you thought, this is bad and we need to sort of change everyone's mindset and behavior?
Yeah, I did, definitely. Like, I can pinpoint the moment. I was working in TV at the time, and I was aware of environmental issues and have been fairly connected to them for most of my lifetime, but I wasn't really aware of the plastic pollution issue back in 2014, so kind of about 3 years before the Blue Planet effect. And I was on Facebook and I saw this video. I was scrolling and this video popped up for a trailer for the film Albatross, and which came out a number of years later. But it was so shocking to see. And I think back then perhaps we weren't sort of completely bombarded with sort of horrific images of environmental destruction. So perhaps it was a bit easier to for something like that to cut through back then. But I remember seeing the devastation that plastic was causing for these incredible albatross chicks in the middle of the Midway Islands. And it was an artist called Chris Jordan who was putting this film together, and it was absolutely beautiful. And it unlocked, I think really for the first time, a very profound grief in me around what we were doing and how far we'd gone astray as humans, especially with our waste, and the impact that was having on our wildlife. And so I think that for me was very much the motivating factor. And it was funny really, because I had no relationship with the ocean whatsoever. Like I literally was completely terrified of the sea and had no couldn't go in it or on it or over it. And so it wasn't my love of the oceans that called me to protect them really. It was very much the albatross. And I've reflected on that a number of times sort of since then, but so that kind of happened, and I knew I had to do something about it. Like that, the power of the my reaction to that was so strong that I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. So I started sort of looking at what I could do in my own time. And it was a few months later after that, I was going along a sort of fairly busy road in Bristol next to the River Avon, which is got the second highest tidal range in the world. So we get these big tidal surges. And I remember thinking, what is that in the river? And I literally saw these islands of plastic floating down the River Avon out to the Bristol Channel. And I was so shocked to see that wasn't just something that was happening in the Pacific, thousands of miles away from me. It was happening here in my home city at the time that we were European Green Capital of Europe. So it kind of really hit home then that, like, wow, there must be something that we can do locally. So yeah, I mean, I think Amy did a great job of covering the number of different ways that plastic is affecting us and affecting our world at the moment. And I think as City to Seas evolved, like initially, for us, it was the wildlife and, how can we get people off of plastics and focus people on refillables and reusables? Like right from the early on, we were looking at how we could transition away from plastics. But I think as we've grown up as an organisation and as the movement has grown up as well, we've started to see the intersections of plastic pollution and seeing that it's not just obviously affecting wildlife, it affects people as well. It affects people where plastic is produced, often communities who are living closely to the factories where plastics are extracted, so through fracking, and they're processed in processing plants. Quite often it's low-income communities of colour who are living right up against those factories. They're known as fence line communities, and those communities are disproportionately affected by the impact of plastic pollution and its production stage. And then we know what happens to it, all the bad things that happens with plastics in its throwaway culture as we use it and where it ends up. But at the other end as well, where we're exporting our waste. So we're currently exporting here in the UK over 60% of our recycling. And a lot of that is getting exported to poorer countries that don't have the infrastructure to actually process our recycling properly. Often it's contaminated, there's not proper regulation around it, it's often ended up being dumped or incinerated. And again, it's marginalised communities that are feeling the impact of that in terms of polluting their water supplies, polluting their air, and that's the term that's becoming known as waste colonialism. So I think as plastic production and awareness of plastic pollution grows, we're starting to see, not just the impact on wildlife, but also the impact on human health, and as Amy said, like the emerging threats that are coming out now, the health risks around just how much plastic we're inhaling. Like a report came out recently that said, I think it's children in particular, are inhaling up to 7,000 microplastic particles a day. And plastic doesn't break down. It doesn't break down in the ocean. It doesn't break down in our bodies. So the impact of inhaling all these plastics over a period of time is as yet to be discovered and researched. And so I think it's really important that those elements get some proper funding. So we put some research into those as well.
And it's interesting, isn't it? The more that sort of comes out about how bad it can be, the more of a problem we realize it is. But I remember way back when I started reading more about plastic, it was the ocean, like you were saying, Natalie, and it was, it's awful for marine wildlife. But now there was the study about it, microplastics being found in blood for the first time. And the more it comes out, the more sort of urgent this feels. And also, like you said, it's amazing you can pinpoint that light bulb moment of when you saw something. And Amy was saying we need to realize it's not a way. And it's like when we see things, it's sort of knocks sense into us that we need to do something. And Amajit, we've had a conversation before when you were on. Amajit, you had your story about when you were in the Maldives and saw plastic. Was that a light bulb moment for you?
It certainly was. And similar to Natalie, I wasn't really an ocean or sea person. I wouldn't really go swimming in the sea. Only until recently, actually, I ventured out and did that. But I was petrified. So it wasn't so much that. It was, this holiday that I spoke to you about, Amy, it was, a special holiday. You sort of think luxury and all the rest of it. And I wasn't on this full journey at that point. And you turn up and this luxury, which it was to look, it was like stepping onto paradise, but actually, all the hidden secrets were there. It's the corals were being cleaned constantly. The beaches were being sort of, swept hourly almost. And initially I was thinking, it's because it's just so luxury, and no, it wasn't. It's because there was coral being washed up, and the resorts just didn't want people to see that, and these moments of, actually these plastics are reaching the creatures and turtles in particular. We went to a turtle sanctuary and it was just horrifying what plastic was actually doing. And then it sort of took it a step further, because at that point there were lots of horrific moments of realization that actually this is all focused towards a single use. And because it's luxury, it's almost an expectation, and because of that I then started looking at, what is actually happening out there and what's happening in the UK, and again I was just horrified that a lot of our plastic pollution was being sent over. And at that point, when I was looking into it, it was sort of being dumped on Turkey, and the impact of that is just catastrophic. So yeah, there was that light bulb moment. There was that moment of realization that I really need to get involved in this, and I really need to do something.
So sort of taking into account what people know about the impact plastic has on the environment, we called this talk A World Without Plastic. It is a distant, hopeful ideal that we could have. But if we had a world with massively reduced plastic, how would that impact our lives? How would our lives be different if we were to not be using plastic every day to sort of in our supermarkets and the things we buy? What are some of the benefits that you think people might not realize, but that we would benefit from? Amy, I'll come to you first. What would you say to that?
I think there's, some plastic, to be honest, is absolutely necessary. So for medical uses, for example, or some sort of safety reasons. But as a consumer, there are a lot of benefits to cutting your plastic consumption. There's things like it's so much easier to manage your recycling bins because you don't have to sort through dozens and dozens of different types of plastic and plastic bottles and that kind of thing when you're putting your bins out every week. As a consumer, the majority of single-use plastic that we have in our homes is going to be one of three things. It's going to be food packaging, it's going to be toiletries, or it's going to be cleaning products. And everyone I know at the moment is taking part in the Great Plastic Count, which you can take part in during May. And one of the things that everyone I know who's done that has noticed is that, the majority of their plastic usage is coming from one of those three areas. And all of those things can be affected and can be reduced by just changing our shopping and consumption habits. Some of the incentive schemes or the sort of stick rather than carrot things that we've seen implemented by governments, for example, like the plastic carrier bag charges, have massively changed our consumer habits in terms of remembering to bring our reusable bags to the supermarket, for example. So there's definitely, a lot of ways that us as consumers can change our shopping habits and our consumption habits, even just slightly, to make a big difference on the amount of plastic that we have to deal with in our everyday lives. And it honestly does kind of give you a bit of headspace, I think, when you're not having to sort of sort through and deal with all these different plastics when you're doing your recycling every week.
No, that's true. And what would you say, Natalie? Do you think having a world without single-use plastic is attainable, is something that we're sort of slowly heading towards?
Sorry, I forgot I have to unmute myself. I think, a world without single-use packaging is probably possible, but for that we're going to have to see, real kind of government buy-in and real sort of solid changes in legislation, real commitments to shift to refill and reuse options. So I think, focusing in on the go packaging, for example, because I think the government and our retailers have still got a lot to answer for in terms of like the problems with recycling and the non-recyclable packaging that we're still seeing. But at City to Sea, we're really interested in how can we really kind of shift the dial in terms of mass adoption of refill and reuse. And so for years we've been looking at like what are the barriers and trying to address the barriers between people carrying a reusable water bottle, filling up their water bottles, actually starting to use coffee cup schemes. And what we're starting to see now is a lot more innovation and adoption sort of on the market. So we're starting to see some really exciting new schemes. So we're working with a company called Beauty Kitchen, who've come up with a new innovation to do refills and pre-fills in supermarkets. So I think sort of, when we start to see that kind of some of those other issues like convenience and affordability addressed, we will see more of a transition towards less single-use plastic packaging, and people will start to kind of have refill and reuse and refilling on the go and refilling at home. Those will become more part of the sort of cultural norms and what we do when we go shopping. But it's going to take some time, and there's also a lot to consider along the way of how do we make sure that's inclusive, and how do we make sure it's sort of democratized and that everybody can do it, and we keep everybody included along the way. But in terms of like the areas, like Amy said, sort of hospitals and other areas where you do need a sort of lightweight solution, I think we're going to see more adoption of sort of non-fossil fuel based plastics in those particular scenarios. So sort of mushroom based, algae based plastics, bioplastics, but certainly we can't switch to those as an alternative to our throwaway single-use packaging.
And so in your campaigns, some of I've followed them. I know that there's the refill revolution. I remember there was the cut the cutlery. In those sort of campaigns, would you say addressing single-use plastic that is quite easily to sort of switch out? So with the cutlery, it might be bringing your own. With the refill, it's about bringing a reusable water bottle.
Yeah, I mean, generally our sort of government-focused petitions are really our way of trying to take the pressure off the individual, because really it really annoys me. I'm still very frustrated about the fact that this still is sort of on the shoulders of individuals to sort of make those changes, and a lot of the time individuals don't have the money, they don't have the time to actually make the shift towards, you know, invest in reusables or visit a number of different shops to do their shopping. So why we try and keep pressure on the government is to make sure that actually they are taking responsibility for the health of their citizens and for the health of the planet, and retailers too, and the producers of plastic. So we've been working hard with a number of other NGOs, non-profits and charities to influence the Environment Act, which has recently been passed, and to make sure plastic was included on that. The cutlery petition in particular was putting pressure on the government to ban some more of the most polluting single-use plastic items, because ultimately we know it's things like bans, taxes, charges, levies that really does shift the dial on a massive level, and that's really where the focus should be. But in the meantime, it's down to us as individuals and as citizens to show that the demand is there and that we want these new solutions, and that demand is generally what drives the investment.
Yeah, and I think that's really important what you say about we can't all make the change, but so those small collective actions that we take and come together and band together on can make a difference. And Amajit, one thing I was going to sort of come across is in terms of us being able to reduce our plastic in our day-to-day lives, are there any ways that either you use or that you can see through sort of your area of work that people can reduce plastic in ways they potentially might not have thought about, or perhaps they're easy swaps, but maybe unique ways that people haven't yet like cotton on to?
Sure. So actually, you know, a lot of this is it's the population, I think, needs to sort of, you know, start with those small steps, and it's not even, you know, the ways in which perhaps people haven't thought about. I think we just need to do a lot of the basics. Yeah, and there's a number of ways that we can reduce plastic, and it's all about changing habits. So, you know, on average, I think it's about 66 days it takes for a new behavior to become automatic. And so for me, it's really the majority of people we have, an embedded habit. For example, if I leave the house, I'm picking up my keys, my house keys, or my handbag, and so we need to really learn to embed those sort of eco-friendly or plastic-free habits into our minds. And really, it's even things like simple things like a shopping bag. You know, you can put a shopping bag into your handbag, so you're not sort of relying on plastic, a plastic version of it if you go to the supermarket. I never leave my house without a shopping bag, or a refillable bottle or a travel cup, because, you know, I love tea, and it's really important for me. And that in itself, they may seem like sort of, you know, small changes, but that in itself reduces a massive amount of my plastic. And, you know, also look for alternatives. It's important that we do that. And one of my first easy swaps was soap bars. It's fact that soap bars have a much lesser impact on the environment versus liquid soap. And of course, that's got everything to do with, you know, the plastic packaging. It's hard plastic containers. And it was said that liquid dispensers are more hygienic. You know, that was the marketing lies, just like I think it was a president that said ketchup is a vegetable. This was a marketing lie that got caught people's attention, especially when it comes to children as well. You know, you if you hear in the news or in an advert that something isn't very good for your child, your heartstrings are there, and you go towards it, even without perhaps looking into the actual sort of facts of it. But I think people are now asking more questions and asking companies to substantiate these sorts of claims. And, you know, actually companies make far more money selling liquid soap dispensers because they don't last as long, and soap bars, they don't last as long as soap bars. And you know, companies simply aren't held responsible for recycling the waste, and that's a win-win situation for them, because it's just a one-way traffic, and you know, they can make more money and not have to clean up the mess. So yeah, I've replaced all of like the plastic soap dispensers in my house with eco-friendly soap bars, and it's amazing how many options there are out there. Another easy one, next time you replace your toothbrush, you know, get yourself a bamboo toothbrush. It's really that easy. And I guess sort of, you know, a general point is we really need to be more aware of greenwashing, and it's easy for companies to pull the wool over your eyes. You know, for example, there's a lot of vegan clothing brands out there that may be vegan, but they're simply adding to the plastic problem. And you know, so it's important to shop with a trusted site or trusted sites that really do truly care about the environment.
And what you were saying there about changing habits, of all of those things, of the soap bars, toothbrush, and thinking about what we consume. Amy, when it comes to grocery shopping, everyone is so used to going to their main supermarket, the biggest supermarket they have near them. It's the easiest one, it's the biggest one, it will have everything. Not everyone has a zero waste store. Have you noticed anything about people coming to Awesome Wales who have you sort of seen that shift of them, I don't know, coming in and then slowly realizing, actually, this is where I should do my food shop?
Sure. So when we first opened Awesome in Barry, everyone told us that it wasn't the right place to open. They told us that the community here weren't affluent enough, that it was a very sort of middle class thing, that we should be opening in a completely different area. And we sort of took that as a bit of a challenge, to be honest, to make sure that we could make the zero waste shopping here affordable for people and accessible to everybody. The easiest swaps that we've provided to people are things like Amadou mentioned, swapping to soap bars or shampoo bars, sort of getting rid of the plastic packaging altogether. But the other thing that we've done is make sure that there's enough products on the shelves so that people can come here and do their full grocery shop with us. So we have everything from, you know, rice, beans and lentils and everything you'd kind of expect from a whole food sort of health food shop, through to loose fruit and veg, bakery bread that just comes in paper packaging that people can put into their own cotton bags. And it just makes it super easy and convenient for people to be able to kind of come and do their full shop. What we don't want to appear is as a novelty or sort of an afterthought where people kind of do their main shop and then come to us with the bits and bobs that they couldn't find and sort of do an eco top up. We wanted it to be a really easy way for people to kind of get all their essentials all in one place, really. So sort of top of our list for things that you can do, whether you have a zero waste shop or not, is sort of do things like buying loose fruit and veg. So you might want to visit your local zero waste shop. If you don't have one, then you can go to your local market or greengrocers. Ideally avoiding the supermarkets who tend to charge more for loose produce, and also, you know, they're just not committed to offering general plastic free options. You know, if you're getting bread or meat or fish, ask the person who owns the shop if you can bring your own container to put it into, so that you can kind of avoid that extra layer of plastic packaging as well. Just take your tubs along. Some of the easiest plastic-free swaps, though, to be honest, you don't need to go to a shop for at all. They don't cost anything. So things like if you're using face wipes that can often include plastic in the wet wipes, you can make your own face wipes out of an old T-shirt. Just cut it up, hem it if you want to. If you're not that bothered, then don't bother. You can just literally have little squares of T-shirt material that you can take your makeup off with or use for your cleanser, and that doesn't cost you anything. But there are over 300, I think, zero waste shops across the UK, meaning that many people will have one nearby. You might not know it's there. It might be a little bit tucked away. So definitely have a quick Google and see where your nearest one is. But there are also food cooperatives and buying clubs where you can kind of club together with other people to buy loose produce at a cheaper price. And for those of you that who don't have something like that nearby, there are loads of lovely online options as well, for getting sort of plastic free goodies delivered straight to your door if that's going to be most convenient for you as well. So yeah, there's definitely options available for everybody, I think.
And it's amazing, like you said at the beginning, that people thought it wasn't the right area to set up the zero waste shop, but you've expanded, so it obviously worked. But what you just said there resonated with me, because I know in the supermarket I go to, the loose fruit and veg, the loose avocados are so much more expensive. And it in some we actually have a zero waste store that's actually recently opened where I work, where I live, but it is more expensive. What would you say to people who are struggling with that guilt of wanting to reduce their plastic consumption, but are struggling with the affordability aspect, especially, I guess, right now?
In my experience, most zero waste shops are either comparable or cheaper than buying the same products in the supermarket. Some zero waste shops do focus on organic only produce, so obviously that can make it a little bit more pricey. But most zero waste shops are independent businesses. They're owned by people from your local community who are trying to make plastic free and ethical shopping easy and affordable. So I would definitely go in and speak to the owners. You know, if there's a certain product that you want to buy, that you buy regularly in the supermarket, and you'd love to buy that product plastic free, if they can get enough local people who are interested in buying that product together, they can make that product affordable for you. We're quite lucky here at Awesome Wales because we're a social enterprise. So we're effectively profit for good. So we don't have to make loads of profit to kind of keep shareholders happy. One of the products that we tend to steer our first time customers towards is refilling their herbs and spices, because that works out super cheap compared to the supermarket. So I've got a little one to show you. So this is my little jar of basil that I refilled this morning. That would have cost anywhere between 75 pence to £1.50 to buy in the supermarket, and it's cost me, let me see if I can get that focus for you, 14 pence to refill here at Awesome. And that cost, even at a zero waste shop that has organic only produce, is still gonna save you a lot of money. So yeah, for anyone who's been worried about sort of zero waste shopping fitting into their budget, I'd suggest they visit the local zero waste shop, speak to the owners, see which products they can recommend that are going to help you to sort of shop ethically and plastic free. Like I said, maybe start by refilling one or two products. Your herbs and spices are a really good place to start. Also, if you're looking to budget, if you're doing things also like cutting down on your meat consumption to reduce your carbon footprint, then your local zero waste shop will have a range of lentils, beans, nuts, seeds, things to make your own veggie recipes. They are always going to work out cheaper than the meat alternative. If you're trying a new ingredient, or if you've got a specific recipe that you're catering for, being able to buy exactly the amount of something that you need actually helps you to budget really well. So if you need a teaspoon of asafoetida, or if you need half a cup of arborio rice for a particular recipe, you can go and buy that, and then that obviously helps you to sort of stretch your food budget a bit as well. And you don't end up with half a packet of something going out of date in the back of the cupboard because you tried it and you didn't like it, or you didn't have another recipe to use it in. A lot of our customers did that for their Christmas cakes, for example, and we could literally tell whether they were doing the Maryberry recipe or the Nigella recipe, depending on which ingredients and which sort of proportions they were buying as well. So it's a really good way, to try a new recipe, to buy exactly what you need, cut food waste, and stick to your budget as well.
Yeah, that's hilarious about what recipe they were doing. It's true though, because sometimes I think I made mulled wine and I had to buy some big pack of star anise that I probably used about 3 things out of for my mulled wine. And sort of on that idea of changing habits and changing mindsets and learning about the things we can do, Natalie, since launching in 2015 to now, that you said City to Sea has been running 6 years, what have you seen about a change in people's sort of behavior habits and mindset? Has it sort of shifted to seeking out solutions rather than sort of waiting for them to come to them?
Yeah, we've definitely seen a big shift, I think, in awareness. And I think one of the things, sort of maybe using our Plastic Free Periods campaign as an example. So when we started out in 2017, really, we kind of launched Plastic Free Periods. There weren't that many people then talking about alternatives to single-use disposable period products. You know, people had heard of Moon Cup, but hadn't really heard of much else. And so it was a really exciting time for us to start talking about this whole kind of explosion and innovation in the period marketplace. So things like period pants and washable period pads and different kinds of cups and alternatives to sort of plastic disposables, so like your Nature Cares. And we started to see a real shift in that, and it was then reflected, I think it was maybe 2018 or 2019, that the internet searches for a Moon Cup, or internet searches for menstrual cup, increased by 300%. And it went from there being kind of like 5 companies on the marketplace to 80 different menstrual cup companies. So that, you know, we really saw how actually starting to have those conversations and normalizing those conversations then sort of opened up the space for more product innovation and people kind of adopting these and trying out these different products. And I think it's sort of, certainly in terms of behaviour change, that's one of the things that we focus on at City to See. So with period products as an example, making them sort of easy to access, easy to sort of understand how to use them, making it accessible. So we've run campaigns focused on supermarkets to get more reusables on supermarket shelves as well as in schools. We developed an education program called Rethink Periods. So there's a behaviour change model called EAST, which is easy, accessible, social and timely. So we try and make sure, if we're doing a people facing campaign, that we build those behaviour change principles into it. And then you see things like social norming. So it becomes more common for people to be talking about things, or for people to be seen with a reusable bottle or a coffee cup. So it's been really exciting actually to see the shifts. And I think now we've seen the sort of early adopters and the pioneers, the people who kind of were really, really passionate and the ones that, like me, on some Saturday at my local zero waste shop, still absolutely cussing as I refilled my bathroom cleaner and it spurted all over my arm and all over the floor. And it's like, oh my God, I'm so looking forward to the days when this is kind of slightly easier and more accessible for everybody. And we're definitely, as I said, starting to see that with like things like pre-fills. But yeah, hats off to the early adopters and the people that have been driving this change for the past sort of 5-10 years, because it's taken off.
It's interesting what you say about that model, because I feel like that is probably, and I know you said you researched about the barriers, but that is being easily accessible is probably one of the biggest barriers. If you don't have a zero waste shop in your town, if you have a shop, your local supermarket that puts all the peppers and courgettes and everything in plastic, a lot of people would just do that for ease and time. So having the accessibility of having menstrual cups on the shelves, having a grocery sort of aisle that doesn't have things in plastic, I'm sure is probably one of the biggest barriers that will enable people to start shopping plastic free. Yeah, when we've done research before, when I've read research before, it's sort of that it's too expensive, or it's not there, it's not big enough. And I think now it's slowly starting to become bigger. I didn't realize, Amy, like you said, there's more than 300 zero waste shops. So sometimes it might just be about seeking them out. We have had a few questions which I will go to. We're in the last 12 minutes. Some of them we've covered already. Someone said, talked about sort of not being able to afford to reduce plastic, feeling guilty. What do you suggest? Does anyone else have any suggestions on the sort of the cost element? Amajit, I don't know if you might have any solutions in the things that are sort of listed in ethical. Is that cost element something people always have to sort of struggle with?
Sure. So I think Amy touched on this earlier as well, in terms of actually a lot of products are normally comparable, if not cheaper. But on ethical, we do look at high quality products. But I think the way that I see it is that actually, if you're buying an item, a clothing item, for instance, I have clothing in my wardrobe that's 20 years old, and that versus fast fashion, where you can only generally, so you're looking at 3, 4, 5 wears out of it. In the long term, actually, that's way cheaper to buy something that is a little bit more expensive because it's going to last much longer. And so it's looking at it as a whole, rather than looking at individual sort of products and the here and now. It's sort of looking at that bigger picture and really doing the sums as to whether in the long term it's either cheaper or more expensive, and you'll probably find that it works out cheaper in the long term.
I'm sure everyone can relate to having an item of clothing that they got as a bargain that did last a year or so and then had to be replaced, sent to a charity shop. Someone has asked, I've heard recycled plastic doesn't actually get recycled. Is this true? And this is something I've heard a lot about, that a massive percentage of plastic that we are recycling isn't able to be recycled for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's because it's not washed out. Does anyone know more about sort of that element of recycling plastic and how much actually does get recycled?
Yeah, I'm happy to pick that up. I mean, as I said earlier, we're exporting around 61% of our plastics, and as we've seen on documentaries like Hugh and Anita's War on Plastic, I think it was, we saw where that plastic was ending up and it wasn't getting properly processed. So our recycling system is broken and it does need fixing. Luckily, not luckily, but finally in the Environment Act, we are going to start seeing extended producer responsibility. So you might see that kind of around in the news. It's called EPR for short, and that makes it so that the producers of plastic, so the brands themselves, will have to pay for the recovery of that plastic. So currently it's the councils, it's the taxpayers that have to pay for that recovery of that plastic waste, but soon it will be the producers. So you're looking at like 2023, 2024 for that to come into play. And when it's affecting their bottom line, that's when you're going to see people quite rapidly changing the way that we process and collect and deal with our plastics. The Environment Act also talks about having a deposit scheme. So that's where you'll get money back for your plastic. What happens with a deposit scheme is that increases the value of the plastic, it increases the quality of the plastic, which means less of it gets exported. So that's what we're really quite excited and to see, although there are a number of reasons why that's being delayed here in the UK, usually by plastic lobbyists. So there's some big forces that we're up against, but yeah, sorry if there's a bit of background noise.
That's okay. You might want to take the next one as well. So someone has asked, and we've touched on this earlier, that it's not just down to the individuals, but how can we put pressure on people in power? So as individuals, like we've shared these tricks and tips that we can use to reduce plastic in our own lives. If people want to go further, what advice would you give to people who want to put pressure on the people that have the power to make a difference?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's what I think is a good thing that people can do who really feel like, they haven't got the time to make the changes, or they have, for some reason haven't got the resources to make those sort of smaller switches. Then actually supporting marine conservation organisations, emailing your MP, writing to your MP. It sounds so old and cliche, but it does really work. And supporting organisations that are doing that kind of lobbying piece, whether it's just if you haven't got the financial resources to support them, then supporting them by sharing their content, by sharing that with your friends. There are ways that people can actually become campaigners in their own right, with just 10 minutes a day or 5 minutes a day, just kind of helping to spread the word of how we can keep up the pressure on our retailers, and still actually calling out the if you've got social media actually sort of highlighting overflowing bins or highlighting a particular brand that you've seen littered somewhere, brands still want to keep a good sort of face and good PR. So ways that sort of threaten that, actually, they are very responsive to. So there are things that we can do, certainly as individuals, to make sure that the government acts faster and brings in the legislation that we need to see.
Mm. And Amajit, is there anything that you would say to sort of, for those that want to take that extra step or extra action in terms of not just their consumption, but collectively working with people that are in power?
No, I think it's super important because, as Natalie just said, the retailers, the brands, they need to really be held responsible. And so, as individuals, taking that time to really lobby against these brands and making sure that they are held responsible. Because I was sort of thinking back on how did this all come about, and a lot of it sort of was from 40 years ago with companies like Coca-Cola and Pepsi, and who made it fashionable using single-use plastic, and it was all down to profit margins, and they have benefited for all those years, and they've not had any responsibility whatsoever. It's been one-way traffic. Previously, they had to collect, clean and refill glass bottles, and they didn't have to do that, and the responsibility went on to individuals. So as some of the listeners now are looking at how they can be individually responsible, and that is absolutely important. But I think individual responsibility is calling up on these big companies to say, hold on, what are you doing about it? You really need to sort of push for change on that side.
Definitely. We have 4 minutes left, so I'm just going to go through all three of you and ask, what one thing would you want people to take away from this talk, and where can people find out more, or what's going on next in your organisation? So I'll come to you first, Amy. What would you like people to take away, and where can people find out more about you and Awesome Wales?
So I think there's been so many amazing ideas shared today through all of the speakers. So thank you for that. I've noted a few things down myself. I think the biggest takeaway is don't try to change everything at once. Look at what you're throwing away. Tackle the biggest issues in your consumption in your dustbin first. For some people, that's going to be food packaging. For others, it might be changing from disposable to cloth nappies a couple of days a week. There's something that you can change immediately, and just do one thing at a time so you don't get overwhelmed. If you want to find out more about us at Awesome Wales, we're at awesome.wales online, and if you're in South Wales or in the Vale of Glamorgan, then please do pop in and see us.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Natalie, what about you? What would you say people should take away from today, and where can people find out more about City to Sea?
I'm definitely going to give you 3 takeaways, but they'll be really quick. So I'd say download the free refill app. So where I'm sat in Bristol, I've got over 50 places around me within half a mile that I can refill or eat or drink and shop with less plastic. So download the free refill app. Get yourself a Chili's water bottle. That raises £10 for our refill campaign every time somebody buys one of these blue Chili's refill bottles, and you get to fill it up for free for the rest of your life if you don't lose it. Finally, sign up to City to Sea's Plastic Free Journal, because that's where you can find out more about how can you be more active in the plastic pollution space. So it's a free monthly roundup of all the plastic pollution news and campaigns going on around the world.
Fantastic. And World Refill Day is coming up. When's that? The 16th of June, is it?
Thanks, Amy. World Refill Day is happening on the 16th of June. So save the date, get out there, get refilling. And if you want to be part of it, and email us for the campaign toolkit so you can get tweeting and doing things in your local zero waste shop or community, then give us a shout.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Amajit, what about you? What one takeaway would you want people to take from this talk, and where can people find out more about ethical?
Sure, thank you. And I think Amy actually mentioned this very briefly earlier, and she talked about the big plastic count. I think with the listeners today, if there's anything that you want to try, is please do try and participate, not in the big plastic count, whether you're submitting your entries or not. It really doesn't matter. I think it just really makes you aware of, what single-use plastic is sort of ending up in your recycled bin. And I mentioned sort of habits earlier, and most of what we buy is because of habit. So once you have this information, you know what the biggest offenders are. For me, it was, I've got young children, and it was sort of snack packaging, and so that we're on a mission now to reduce that. But and I thought we were really good with sort of single-use plastic. We didn't really use very much, but actually that really highlighted quite a lot to me. So please do try that, even if it's just sort of for your own information. And of course, if you do want to learn more about ethical, that's ETHIKEL, please do visit our website. You can contact me through the Contact Us, and I will respond. So yeah, please feel free to browse and get in touch.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. We are out of time. The hour always goes so quickly, but thank you to all three of you for giving up an hour of your time to come and talk plastic with us. I know there's a lot of tips that I will be taking away as well, and like you said, Amy, scribbling down. And thank you everyone to watching. I hope you have something that you can take away from this talk too, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.